The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. I sat alone on the left side, my hands shaking in my lap, while my ex-wife Claire sat across the aisle with our son Jacob. He was 14 now, taller than I remembered, his dark hair falling over his eyes the way it always did when he was uncomfortable. The judge asked him a simple question. "Jacob, do you wish to maintain contact with your father?" My son looked right through me like I was a stranger on the street. "No, Your Honor," he said, his voice flat and cold. "I don't want to see him ever again." Claire smiled then, just a small curve of her lips that only I could see. The judge granted her full custody without visitation rights. As people filed out, the court clerk accidentally left behind a sealed envelope on the bench. It had Jacob's name written across it in Claire's handwriting. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. The house was exactly as I'd left it that morning, except it felt different now, empty in a way that had nothing to do with furniture. I walked through each room, touching the walls, like I was saying goodbye. In Jacob's old bedroom, the one he'd stayed in during weekends before Claire stopped letting him come, I found something that made my chest tight. An old photograph of us at his baseball game, the one where he'd hit his first home run. Someone had torn it perfectly in half. My side was missing. Only Jacob remained in the picture, smiling at nothing, his arm reaching toward empty space where I used to be. The knock came at midnight. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the quiet house. I opened the door to find Elizabeth standing there, my sister who'd been the only family member to believe me through everything. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," she said, pushing past me into the living room. She made coffee while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. "He'll come back to you," Elizabeth said, "when he's older, when he can think for himself." I wanted to believe her, but the look in Jacob's eyes today had been pure hatred. Before she left, I took the sealed envelope I'd grabbed from the courthouse and locked it in the safe behind my father's old painting. Something told me it mattered, even if I didn't know why yet. The whispers started immediately. At the grocery store, people I'd known for years suddenly found other aisles to walk down. My neighbor stopped waving. The mechanic, who'd fixed my car for a decade, told me to find another shop. Claire had been busy, spreading her version of events to anyone who would listen. I was dangerous, she said. Unstable. She'd had to protect Jacob from me. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter when the story was this good. The worst part came 3 months later when I was flipping through channels and saw Jacob on the local news. He was at some charity event with Claire and her new boyfriend, Robert Mays. The reporter asked Jacob about his family, and he smiled that fake smile I'd seen him practice in the mirror. "This is my dad," he said, pointing to Robert. "He's always been there for me." What I didn't know then was that Claire had written a letter the night before the custody hearing. She'd sat at her desk in the house that used to be ours, the lamp casting shadows across her face as she put pen to paper. "Dear Jacob," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and it's time you knew the truth." She wrote for an hour, her handwriting getting messier as tears fell on the pages. She confessed everything. The lies she'd told him about me, the ways she'd manipulated his memories, turned his love into fear. "Your father never hurt you," she wrote. "I made you believe he did because I was angry, because I wanted to hurt him the way he hurt me, by asking for the divorce. But she never sent it." The next morning, she hid the letter in a false drawer behind her closet, the kind with a hidden latch that looked like solid wood. 8 years passed like a slow death. I moved through life doing the motions but never really living. Then Elizabeth called one Tuesday morning. "Claire died yesterday," she said. "Heart attack." She was only 46. The funeral was small, held at the church where Claire and I got married 20 years earlier. Jacob was there, 22 now, wearing a black suit that made him look like a stranger. He didn't look at me once during the service. Afterward, the lawyer read the will. Claire left everything to Jacob: the house, her savings, her car. As people left, Jacob stayed behind, staring at the house keys in his hand. "There's something wrong with the master closet," he said to no one in particular. "The measurements don't match the room size." Jacob spent the next week cleaning out his mother's house, boxing up her clothes and sorting through papers. He'd taken time off from his job in the city to handle everything. The closet bothered him. He measured it 3 times, confirming what his eyes already told him. There should be 2 more feet of space behind the back wall. He started tapping, listening for hollow sounds, until he found it. A small latch hidden in the trim work. The false panel swung open, revealing a shallow space stuffed with papers and old jewelry. And a letter. His name written across the envelope in his mother's handwriting. His hands shook as he opened it. 20 minutes later, he was still sitting on the floor, the pages spread around him, his whole world crumbling. The last line hit him like a fist. "I lied. Your father never hurt you. I'm sorry." Jacob couldn't breathe. Every memory he had of me, every reason he'd built for hating me, suddenly had cracks running through it. He remembered being 7, crying in his room, and his mother sitting next to him saying, "Your father gets angry. That's why we have to leave." But now he tried to remember his father getting angry, and he couldn't find a single real memory. Just his mother's voice, telling him what happened. He sat in that closet for hours, reading the letter over and over. Then, he remembered something else. His mother had left him the house in the will, but when he looked at the deed, his hands went cold. The house was still in my name. Claire had been living in my house for 8 years, paying the mortgage from my bank account through some legal trick I'd never understood. Everything he'd believed was a lie. The next day, Jacob met with his mother's lawyer, a sharp woman named Miss Grant, who'd handled the divorce. "I need to understand the trust," Jacob said. Miss Grant pulled out a thick folder. "Your mother set up a trust when you turned 16. Your father was named as beneficiary, but he couldn't access it until you turned 25, or she passed away, whichever came first." Jacob's jaw tightened. Why couldn't he access it? The terms stated, he had to have maintained a relationship with you. Since you'd cut contact, he was technically in violation. Miss Grant paused. "But here's the complicated part. If he doesn't claim it within 30 days of your mother's death, it transfers to Robert Mays as the secondary beneficiary." Jacob felt sick. Robert, his mother's boyfriend. The man he'd called Dad on television. The man who'd smiled at him while stealing everything that belonged to his real father. I was washing dishes when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Dad?" The word hit me like lightning. I hadn't heard Jacob call me that in 8 years. My throat closed up. "Jacob? I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" His voice was different now, deeper, but there was something else. Uncertainty. Maybe even fear. We agreed to meet the next day at Rosie's Diner, the place we used to go every Saturday morning before everything fell apart. I hung up and sat down hard on the kitchen floor, my hands shaking so bad I had to press them against my knees. Elizabeth came over that night. "What changed?" I asked her. "Why now?" No, she didn't know, but her eyes were wet. "Does it matter?" she said. "He called you Dad." The diner looked exactly the same. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floor, the smell of coffee and bacon grease. Jacob was already there when I arrived, sitting in our old booth by the window. I slid in across from him, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "I found something," Jacob finally said. He pulled out the letter, now worn from being folded and unfolded so many times. I read it slowly, my vision blurring halfway through. When I finished, I couldn't look at him. "I'm sorry," Jacob said, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry, Dad. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to rage at the 8 years stolen from us. But all I felt was tired. It's not your fault. A Grombuff. Cricklands. Gricklands make. Well, so 45. I'm so sorry, I said. You were a kid. Jacob wiped his eyes. There's something else. Mom had another secret. Money she moved through Robert. A lot of it. And I think it was yours. Elizabeth had been Claire's friend before she was my sister-in-law. That's how Claire and I met, actually, at Elizabeth's birthday party, 15 years ago. After the divorce, Elizabeth sided with me, which cost her the friendship. But she'd seen things over the years. Heard things. I remember once, Elizabeth told us, sitting in my living room the next evening. I was at Claire's house, maybe 5 years ago. Robert was there. And they were arguing about some account. Claire said something like, "You promised you'd keep it hidden until Jacob was older." Robert said, I'm taking my cut first." They stopped talking when they saw me. Jacob leaned forward. "What kind of account?" "Offshore. I think. Claire had been moving money from your father's business before the divorce was finalized. I didn't understand it then. But now." Elizabeth looked at me. "Michael, I think she stole from you." The next morning, I met with a lawyer. Elizabeth recommended. A young guy named Tom Bradshaw, who specialized in trust disputes. He spread all our documents across his desk and started making notes. Tom said, after an hour, "If your ex-wife moved assets illegally, you might have a case. But we'd need to prove guardianship was legitimate at the time." "What does that mean?" Jacob asked. "It means proving your father was always the rightful guardian, even after the divorce. That the custody arrangement was based on false testimony." Tom looked at me. "You'd basically be asking the court to invalidate the original ruling." That same day, Robert showed up at Jacob's apartment. Jacob told me about it later, how Robert had pushed his way inside. His face red with anger. "Drop whatever you're planning," Robert had said, "or I'll destroy your father. I have lawyers. I have money. You have nothing." Elizabeth called me at 6 in the morning. "I found something." I was at her apartment 20 minutes later. She pulled out her old phone, the one she'd kept in a drawer for years because it had photos she couldn't bear to delete. "I recorded something once," she said, her hands shaking. "I didn't mean to. My phone was in my purse at Claire's house, and it was on voice memo by accident." She pressed play. Claire's voice filled the room, tinny and distant, but clear. "I had to keep Jacob away from Michael. If they stayed close, Jacob would figure out I was lying. I know it's wrong, but I was so angry. Michael didn't fight for our marriage. He just gave up." Another voice. Robert's. "So you made the kid hate him." "I did what I had to do. Jacob believes me now. He'll never go back." I drove to Cedar Hills Cemetery that Saturday, something I did every few months. My father's grave was in the back corner, under a big oak tree that dropped acorns every fall. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and told him everything. About Jacob calling. About the letter. About the money Claire had stolen. "I don't know if I can do this," I said to the stone. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight her again, even if she's gone." The wind picked up, rattling the leaves. As I stood to leave, I noticed something. Fresh flowers on the grave, not from me. Under them was a folded piece of paper. I opened it with shaking hands. 7 words in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Don't trust the lawyer. Follow the money." Miss Grant showed up at my house 2 days later. I almost didn't let her in, remembering the note, but she looked different, scared. "I need to tell you something," she said, standing in my doorway. "About the divorce proceedings." We sat in my living room. Miss Grant pulled papers from her briefcase with shaking hands. "I made copies," before I submitted the originals to the court. It's something we do routinely for record keeping. She spread them on my coffee table. These are what I filed. These are what ended up in the official record. I looked at both sets. They were different. Dates had been changed. Testimony had been altered. My statements had been edited to make me sound unstable. Robert paid me, Miss Grant said, crying now. $50,000 to make sure you lost custody. I was drowning in student loans. I told myself it was just paperwork, that it didn't really matter. But it did matter. I'm sorry. Jacob sat in his childhood bedroom, the one in Claire's house that he'd moved back into temporarily while settling her estate. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw my face from the courtroom 8 years ago. The way I'd looked at him, hopeful and desperate. The way that hope died when he said he never wanted to see me again. He got up and started going through boxes, looking for something, though he didn't know what. In the back of his closet, he found an old plastic bin filled with toys and school papers. At the bottom was a cassette tape with his name on it. He didn't own a cassette player anymore, but his mother's old stereo was still in her bedroom. He popped the tape in and pressed play. His own voice filled the room, 7 years old, crying. I want my daddy. Why can't I see my daddy? Mommy says he's bad, but he's not bad. He reads me stories. Please, I want to go home. Tom Bradshaw filed the motion to reclaim my parental rights on a Monday morning. The legal term was reinstatement of guardianship based on fraudulent termination. It sounded cold and official, but what it meant was simple. I was asking the court to say I'd always been Jacob's father, that nothing Claire did could change that. Jacob signed an affidavit supporting the motion. In it, he detailed finding the letter, learning about the forged documents, understanding that his memories had been manipulated. My mother made me believe my father was someone he wasn't, Jacob wrote. She stole 8 years from us. I'm asking the court to give us a chance to get some of that time back. When I read his words, I cried for the first time since the original custody hearing. Not from sadness, but from something else. Something that felt like hope. Robert filed an emergency injunction the next day, trying to block Elizabeth's testimony and prevent the voice memo from being entered as evidence. His lawyers argued that it was recorded without consent, that it was hearsay, that it had no bearing on a case that was resolved 8 years ago. The hearing was set for Friday. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Then, on Thursday night, my doorbell rang. A woman stood there, maybe 50, with Claire's eyes and nose. I'm Vanessa, she said. Claire's older sister. I'd met her once at the wedding, but Claire had been estranged from her family for years. Some fights I never understood. I know what she did to you, Vanessa said. I tried to stop her back then, but she wouldn't listen. I'm here to testify. Claire told me everything before she died. She wanted to make it right, but she ran out of time. The courtroom was packed. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Tom, Jacob beside me for the first time in 8 years. Across the aisle, Robert sat with his legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits who looked like they ate people for breakfast. The judge was a woman named Harrison, maybe 60, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Tom stood to give his opening statement. Your Honor, this case is about a father who was stolen from his son through lies and legal fraud. We're here to correct that injustice. Robert's lead attorney, a man named Pierce, stood next. Your Honor, this is a desperate attempt to overturn a legal custody decision 8 years after the fact. The original ruling was sound. The plaintiff is simply unhappy with the outcome. Judge Harrison looked at both sides. I've reviewed the briefs. This is highly unusual. Mr. Bradshaw, you have a high burden of proof here. I hope you understand that. Tom called Elizabeth first. She walked through the voice memo, explaining when and where it was recorded. Robert's lawyer tried to get it thrown out, but Judge Harrison allowed it. When Elizabeth played the recording, the whole courtroom went silent. Claire's voice, admitting she'd lied, admitting she'd kept Jacob from me on purpose. Robert shifted in his seat. Next, Tom entered the original documents Miss Grant had kept, alongside the forged versions from the official record. Miss Grant testified about taking Robert's money, about changing dates and statements. She was crying the whole time. Then came the deed to the house, showing I'd been making mortgage payments for 8 years while Claire lived there. Finally, Tom introduced Claire's letter. Jacob had to testify to authenticate it, to confirm it was his mother's handwriting. Judge Harrison held the letter for a long time, reading it twice. Then she looked at Robert. "Mr. Mays, did you know about this letter?" Robert's jaw tightened. "No, Your Honor." Tom stood again. "Your Honor, we'd like to present one final piece of evidence." He nodded to Elizabeth, who pulled out her phone and connected it to the courtroom speaker system. "This is a voice memo recorded by Claire Thompson 3 weeks before her death. She sent it to me, but asked me not to share it unless something happened to her." Elizabeth pressed play. Claire's voice again, but different this time. Weaker. Sick. "Elizabeth, if you're playing this, I'm gone. I need you to tell Michael I'm sorry. Tell Jacob I'm sorry. Everything I did was wrong. I kept Jacob away from his father because I was angry and bitter. Robert helped me hide money. He helped me forge documents. Michael never did anything wrong except stop loving me. I destroyed my son's relationship with his father, and I'll never forgive myself." The recording ended. Robert was pale. Judge Harrison asked for a 15-minute recess to verify the signatures on the deed and the original documents. When Judge Harrison returned, the courtroom went silent. "I've reviewed all the evidence," she said. "I've verified the signatures. I've listened to the recordings." She looked directly at me. "Mr. Thompson, the original custody ruling was obtained through fraud and perjury. I'm overturning that decision effective immediately." My heart stopped. "Furthermore, I'm ordering that the trust funds be released to you as the rightful beneficiary. Mr. Mays, you're under investigation for fraud and conspiracy. I'm referring this case to the district attorney." Robert stood up, shouting. But the bailiff made him sit down. Judge Harrison turned to Jacob. "Young man, the court recognizes that you were a victim in this situation. You were manipulated as a child. If you wish, you may petition to have your legal name changed back to Thompson from your mother's maiden name. The court will expedite that request." Jacob looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "Yes, Your Honor. I want my name back." We walked to the old ball field that night, the one where Jacob played Little League until he was 12. The lights were off, but the moon was bright enough to see the bases, the pitcher's mound, the bleachers where I used to sit and cheer. "I hit my first home run here," Jacob said, standing at home plate. "I remember. I have the picture. Mom tore it in half. I found both pieces in her desk." Jacob pulled them from his wallet, the two halves taped together. "I kept them." We sat in the grass near first base. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. "I don't know how to do this," Jacob said. "How to be your son again." "We don't have to figure it out tonight," I said. "We have time now." Jacob nodded. Then he said the words that broke something open in my chest. "I think it's time we rebuild, Dad. Together." 6 months later, Jacob and I started the Thompson Family Foundation. We used the trust money Claire had tried to steal to help other fathers who'd lost their kids to parental alienation. We funded legal aid. We created support groups. We told our story to anyone who would listen. Elizabeth ran the day-to-day operations. Miss Grant volunteered as our legal consultant, trying to make up for what she'd done. Even some of my old friends came back, apologizing for believing the lies. I won't say everything is perfect. Jacob and I still have hard days. Sometimes he looks at me, and I can see him remembering all the years we lost. Sometimes I wake up angry at Claire for what she stole from us. But we're building something new. Every Saturday, we have breakfast at Rosie's Diner. Every Sunday, Jacob comes to my house and we watch baseball. We're learning each other again. And I've learned something important. Sometimes the truth takes its time to surface. It hides in false drawers and sealed envelopes. It waits through years of lies and courtrooms and broken hearts. But it never dies. Truth has roots that go deeper than any lie. You just have to be patient enough, strong enough, to dig it up. And when you finally hold it in your hands, when you finally see it in the light, it's worth every second you waited. My son stopped talking to me after the divorce, but he came back, and that's all that matters now.